What's the scariest thing that's ever woken you up during the middle of the night? When I was a kid, we went camping in the woods. I heard what I thought was a bear outside our pop-up camper and it woke me up. Me and my two brothers were sleeping on one side, with me in the middle, and our parents were sleeping on the other side. It was completely dark so I couldn't see a thing. But, I could hear what I thought was a bear snorting around outside. I was scared to death. I couldn't figure out a way to climb over my brothers and cross to the other side to wake up my father, without making noise and alerting the bear to the tasty meal waiting inside. So, I just lied there perfectly still for the whole night, waiting for giant claws to rip their way through the canvas. As the sun came up and I started to see, I noticed that the lump that was my father in his sleeping bag was rising and falling with the bear's snorting. Turns out my dad's snoring had kept me up all night in absolute fear. Once I woke up because I heard music playing from the kitchen and I thought maybe Mom forgot to turn the radio off. I went through the dark hallway to the kitchen to turn the radio off, but when I was standing in the dark kitchen there was no music playing. Everything was as quiet as always at 3 a.m. No lie, about 7 or 8 years ago, my ex-husband was constantly cheating and we had 2 under 2 in diapers. I was so stressed out I started getting audio hallucinations, and then a couple of visual hallucinations. Someone was randomly whispering my name, all the frickin' time, and seeing shadow people or blood in my peripheral vision. Had debilitating migraines to go with it. I thought surely I have a brain tumor and got an MRI done. Nothing was wrong in there, was told I was just super stressed out and depressed. The stress slowly melted away once I left my ex-husband. Anyway, don't jump to worst case scenario, lol. Edit. Obviously get it checked out though. I woke up with chunks of teeth in my mouth and severe abdominal pain, probably swallowed some tooth. Then, I looked across the room and there was a pool of blood on the opposite side of the room. After quickly spitting out the rest of the teeth bits, I went to the bathroom and was shocked to see my entire face was bleeding, but from a deep cut in my chin and not from my missing tooth. I realized that I had sleepwalked, then decided to fall asleep while standing on the other side of the room and did a belly flop straight on the floor, and then somehow after all of that, got up again and walked back into bed and fell asleep for a few more hours. I had to get a new tooth from a student doctor that I've never gotten fixed. I also ended super gluing my busted chin together because I couldn't afford stitches. I was drifting off, and was already dreaming, but it seemed I was still awake, because I was dreaming of myself in bed, in my room, but in my dream I was awake. I dreamt some people or person swung through the bedroom door and ran towards me in an instant and hit me with all their might with some heavy object. I shook awake. It was a similar feeling when you may startle yourself awake because it seems like you're falling. It took a moment for my brain to tell me I was alone, and it was just a dream. It was so strange, exhilarating, scary. Never had a dream like it since. Oh my god. I once had a dream where I was asleep in bed, rolled over, and the person next to me was not my husband. He was terrifying looking. He reached for me and I screamed and ran for the door. There was another terrifying stranger danger at our bedroom door who reached for me too. So I screamed again and bolted and I woke up halfway in the bathroom with my husband going, "Bitch, bitch, you're okay, you're okay." I think I gave him a heart attack that night. My sister had an all-white clown doll that hung from the ceiling on a little swing. In the summertime, we slept with our doors and windows open to get the cool air in. When I woke up one night hearing some tapping against her window down the hall. If I sat up in bed and looked down the hall, and I could see into the front of her bedroom. So I did, and I see this fucking clown, swinging back and forth against her window, backlit by the street lamp, but clearly staring directly into my soul like it was all it desired in this world. I didn't sleep well that summer. I had a silky glass clown doll and its head was detachable, why I have no clue. It also made musical sounds if you wound it up. One night its head rolled off onto my bed and the music twanged when it happened, Just a few musical notes probably caused by the movement. I shrieked, then threw that thing out the very next day. I asked my mom why I even had it in the first place, and her answer was I thought it was cute. Yeah, no, there is no such thing as a cute clown. My parents visited my wife and I, and since we didn't have 2 bedrooms, we let them stay in our bedroom. But we have 2 cats and they can open the bedroom door if it isn't locked by key. We told them to remember to close it. Sometime at night I hear a scream followed by a cat. Come to find out that my mom went to use the bathroom but forgot to lock the bedroom door afterwards, and my dad was greeted by my cat's face staring at his. Honestly, it was probably scarier for my cat, who was expecting to see me instead. It turned out to be funny. Someone was trying loudly to break into a car just outside my ground floor bedroom window that faced a large parking lot in an apartment complex. He was trying to smash the windows and wasn't strong enough, and was yelling a lot. I called the police. I heard every word they said when they showed up. It turned out that he was trying to break into his own car, because he was too drunk to find his own keys in his own pocket. I heard someone quietly trying my front doorknob late at night. I wasn't quite asleep yet. I checked with my roommate later, and it wasn't them. It happened once or twice more, but I never got to the door quickly enough to see who it was through the peephole. Nothing ever came of it, and I live somewhere else now. BF was out of town and I heard a voice in the middle of the night. My dogs woke up and barked too. Heard the voice again, sounded like a British woman. Grabbed the gun and started lurking the house like WTFFFFFFFFFF. It was my carbon monoxide detector that apparently talks to tell me the battery was low. But it scared the shit out of me for a few minutes. The night I watched the movie The Conjuring, I woke up to my bed shaking and all the clothes hanging in my closet rattling like crazy. Took me quite some time to realize it was an earthquake and not the devil come visiting. When I was in my final year at high school, I had trouble sleeping at night with my final exams approaching. I think I dozed off for a bit and suddenly woke up to see a person's face staring in through my window grill. I was in such a panic I literally couldn't move or scream. Luckily he saw me wake up and escaped. I woke up and heard someone walking outside my bedroom window. The window was open and there were leaves on the ground. I got up and put my back against the wall next to the window. I heard a very distinct human walking sound getting closer and closer. I was pooping my pants at this point. They were now very close and I could see out the window, but I could not see them. I was pressed against the wall as the footsteps got closer and closer. Then the footsteps got quieter as the being got farther away. It took every nerve in my being to look out that window and nothing. I went outside and looked back there, baseball bat in hand, and saw a very large possum. No scary criminal. A fox making the scary as fuck noise foxes make. Literally thought that there was gonna be zombies outside, was so scared I wouldn't even go check with my ex what the hell it was. What does the fox say? Hail Satan. When I went cycling and camping alone in Saguaro National Park, Tucson, Oz, which maybe wasn't the smartest thing to do by yourself. I was in my mid-20s and went specifically to look for and photograph animals, namely snakes, so I had no fear of creatures. I set up camp one night in a gravelly area, and was woken up in the middle of the night by footsteps approaching my tent in the gravel. What scared the living shit out of me and kinda, sorry if this makes me sound like a pussy, put me off camping alone forever, is that it really sounded like something very heavy and bipedal, like a crazy person coming to murder me. Or Sasquatch. It approached my tent with slow, heavy footsteps crunching in the gravel. I didn't hear any other sound, no breathing or rustling of clothing. Just crunching gravel. There were just 2 footsteps, not 4. It came right up to the tent, then walked away, slowly. I have no idea what it was, and it may have been a mountain lion. They can walk pretty stealthily. But the thought of a human being walking around in the desert at night and slowly approaching me while I slept is what scared me the most, not the thought of an animal or monster. I wanted to call out hello, but was literally paralyzed with fear. I didn't sleep again that night, but came out at sunrise to find zero evidence, and just carried on with my trip without incident, but have not been camping alone since. A shadow person from a sleep paralysis episode. I have had sleep paralysis twice. I never see anything, but I know if I could just move a bit I would be able to see something standing in the doorway. Worst was the first time. My daughter, who was 3 at the time, is in bed with me, and I feel completely paralyzed and unable to protect her. It was horrendous. I don't believe in anything supernatural, but obviously my mind was playing tricks on me at the time. On a camping trip with friends in a state park. In the middle of the night our tent is woken up by the sound of gunshots. It is illegal to go hunting in state parks, so we weren't sure if the shooter was hunting animals or just shooting a gun randomly into the woods. Gunshots grew louder over the next hour, so it seemed like the shooter was getting closer to our campsite. A state trooper helicopter started flying overhead with a spotlight trying to find the shooter. We eventually heard a bunch of cop cars up the hill from our campsite, and heard the state troopers get out and order the shooters to drop their weapons, and they brought the shooters into custody. The next morning we asked the people who ran our campsite what happened. The people who lived in the house up the hill had apparently done a lot of meth, then decided to use cars driving down the main road as target practice. There were RVs and trees in our campsite that had bullet holes in them. Luckily none of the bullets hit any campers, or caused any of the cars to go off the road, which would have sent them hurtling down a mountainside. My wife and I were separated and I was sleeping in the basement apartment of our home. She woke me in the middle of the night to come upstairs. There in the kitchen was an intruder sitting calmly at the table. My wife left me alone with this person at 3 a.m. I was shaking, scared that this person would snap and get violent. Turns out he was stoned out of his mind and my wife had forgotten to lock the front door. She had left to call the police. I found out later that she had found him in my son's room. There aren't many things scarier than finding a stranger in your house in the middle of the night. Exploding head syndrome woke me up in sheer terror the first time it happened. Another time when police were looking for my flatmate who was an overstayer, they didn't bother knocking the door, but one of the cops stuck his arm through my bedroom window, right next to my bed, and if I hadn't been so panicked I would have snapped that arm against the window frame, and then probably faced charges. Yano, when I was in Iraq, I was woken up multiple times by gunfire or an explosion. You'd think one of those instances would be the most scared I've ever woken up, but you'd be wrong. That dubious honor goes to my wife farting loud enough to make the dog bark about 2 weeks ago at 3 a.m. That was, hands down, the quickest I've ever shot awake, trying to mutter the fuck kind of apocalypse is this? Around my heart, which had crawled up my throat and gotten a death grip on my uvula. When I was around 7 I was drifting off to sleep in bed one night. I had this toy airplane that hung from a string from the ceiling and if it has batteries it would buzz around in circles once turned on. But this didn't have batteries for a long time. I was facing away towards the wall side when I heard a loud crack like something had struck the plane. My body froze, I couldn't move, I was so scared. Couldn't scream to call my parents in the other room. I was frozen for what felt like a few minutes. When I could finally move my body I turned to find the plane swinging from side to side silently, no batteries, nobody else in the room. This was probably the scariest moment of my life, so far. It was about 3 to 4 a.m. at night and I woke up drenched in sweat. My fan and everything was on, but I was still panting and breathing heavily. I tried to go back to sleep, but next to me was a blanket that looked like a face. Woke me would have been so terrified, but half awake me squished the blanket and disregarded it after I did. Not even 5 minutes later, when I was drifting back to sleep, a thing, like a toy or something, said "I love you," twice. I was then frozen in shock and fear. I am not a person who has toys in their room, either. I only have stuffed bears that are sitting on chairs, so I was scared to hear that. What makes it worse is that the voice I heard sounded like a 6th grade girl. At that time I was in 7th grade, and I don't have siblings, so it had to be something. Again. 5 minutes later, it says "I love you" again, and that's when I got enough courage to reach for my phone and turn on the flashlight, and I stayed awake for the rest of the night. Didn't hear it again. That night still haunts me and I will never get over it. The TV coming on at full volume, blaring static. While still waking up, sounded like all water pouring into our apartment. I was initially relieved to discover that a secret fire hose hadn't turned on somewhere, but then I was disturbed about what would have caused the TV to turn on at a volume it had never been cranked to before on static when we had working cable. Can't remember if we turned it off and on again right away, but I know it was working normally the next day. This was about 13 years ago. I think you're living in a horror movie and you just don't know it. I went into my first ever seizure, but didn't go unconscious as I would in future seizures. I was laying in my bed, and suddenly I started convulsing, fully awake, but fully out of control of my limbs, as they violently shook, my head bouncing off my pillow up and down for what felt like several minutes. Eventually I managed to swing my legs over the side of my bed, into a prayer position, my head still bouncing around. After the convulsions stopped, I made my way toward the stairs, doing a 360 in the hall as I bounced off the wall, though the bounce was the last thing I remembered until I was standing in front of my mother in the living room. She was watching the 10 p.m. news. I tried to explain what happened, but the words coming out of my mouth, more like words, were not understood, but she did catch my wincing in pain and pointing to my head. She gave me children's Tylenol and sent me back to bed. I wouldn't be officially diagnosed with a seizure disorder for another several months, after I smacked a friend in the face during a sleepover, and another episode. I was 3 years old. It was storming. I woke up to a crack of lightning. The power had gone out, so it was pitch black in my room. I rolled over towards the left side of my bed, and sitting on the corner, 3 inches from my face, was an absolutely ginormous cricket. Its beady black eyes bore into my soul. It made a cricket noise and I freaked out, and when I regained my composure the cricket was no longer there. I'm still scarred to this day. Long story, we usually sleep with the windows closed, and we're used to that noise level. But one night it was just the perfect temperature and so we decided to leave the windows open. About 2 a.m. some cats started having very loud sex right outside the window. Yo owl and so forth. My wife, forgetting that the window was open, thought that the cats were in the room and attacking our dog, so she yelled the dog's name and grabbed her. The dog had been fast asleep. She was surprised, so she let out a piercing yarp. Meanwhile, I'm a heavy sleeper, so I woke up to, "You owl. Haggis." Our dog's name, Yarp. I sat up in bed and screamed. And once I started I couldn't stop. I yelled at the top of my lungs for probably 10 seconds straight before I finally realized where I was and that nothing was in the room trying to kill me. In college, my friend and I lived on campus kind of out on the edges, near the animal units, think lightly forested, set back from the main road a bit. One night she knocks on my door and silently motions me to her room, eyes wide. We slept with our windows open because of the gorgeous night weather. Outside her window we hear a high-pitched wailing. After staring at each other for a couple minutes, we stupidly decided to go out with flashlights, expecting to find a woman, injured and wailing. We found nothing, and didn't sleep soundly, but the next morning found a dead bunny. Their injured screams are strangely human and I'll never look at a bunny the same way. My husband was on a work trip and he was supposed to come home on a Friday while I was at work, so I was home alone for a week. No kids, no pets. They decided to come back early and just drive in the middle of the night home. I was already on edge from staying home by myself. Next thing I know, I hear my front door open, and I start to panic. It's 3 in the morning and someone is in my house. I finally figure out it was him, but I didn't sleep the rest of the night. He said he didn't want to call/text me BC he didn't want me to wake up. About a week later, our neighbor, who we call Meth Head McGee, tried for break into her house in the middle of the night while he was high. He had a small meth explosion in his house, so he came running over to ours trying to get help. Hearing him wiggle the knob and kick the door was terrifying.